Hello and welcome to Different Perspectives. I'm Paul Ndiho, coming to you live with an urgent and timely discussion on the political crossroads facing Ivory Coast. This weekend, the Ivorians went to the polls in a tightly controlled election where President Alassane Ouattara, now 83 years old, is seeking a controversial fourth term in office. Key opposition figures were barred from the race, protesters were crushed, and many voters stayed at home in protest. Now the ballots are being counted, but many observers are already asking why, whether this was really an election or just one of those selections. To unpack what's at stake, I'm joined by a returning guest and friend of this program, Dr. Nyaka Lagoke, an associate professor of history, philosophy, and religion at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, and a respected voice on the Ivorian and African politics. Dr. Lagoke has been sounding the alarm for many, many years about what he calls constitutional coups, especially in West Africa, and the erosion of democratic norms in that region. Dr. Nyaka Lagoke, welcome back to Different Perspectives.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul, for having me this morning.
It's always a pleasure to have you on, my friend.
Yeah, it's also the pleasure is mine also.
Well, let's get into it. Let's start by you maybe setting the stage. I'm sure you've been talking to a lot of people who voted and who did not vote. So tell us what you are gathering on the ground and where the country heads after the polls are counted.
Oh, but I think that everyone knows what is happening there. The two main important opposition leaders, the former president Gbagbo Laurent, who was taken to the Hague, who was acquitted, is back in Ivory Coast, and then he could not run for president. And then Tidiane Thiam, who is the grandson of the first president of Ivory Coast, Félix Houphouët-Boigny. So Tidiane Thiam now is the head of the party created by his grandfather. Mr. Ouattara's institutions decided that he should not be running. So two heavyweights who were excluded from the electoral process, and then they initially wanted to somehow take to the streets based on what I heard, what I observed, and then eventually they could not, and people were crushed, and some people were killed, and the election took place yesterday. Many of the supporters of the ones that I just mentioned stayed at home. I did not want to go and vote, and some who represents some minority constituencies decided to go to the elections, and then some people went out to vote. Most of the people who voted surely were Alassane Ouattara supporters and who were hoping to see him accept to run for the fourth term. So, based on what I heard this morning, or what I read since yesterday, there were some ballots. The people destroyed in some regions in Ivory Coast and in the western part of Ivory Coast. Some people were killed. So yes, so this is the reality.
Interesting. Is Ouattara's fourth term bid legally valid under the 2016 constitution, or it's just political maneuvering?
But of course, it's political maneuvering. So when the new constitution, obviously not the new, but when the constitution of 2016 was drafted, the one who was the head of the commission, uh, and then some other members, they spoke publicly on TV, said that based on what they did, Mr. Ouattara could not run for the third term. This is what I said. And then so they spoke. And then 2020, Mr. Ouattara decided to have his own interpretation of the constitution in order to justify like his third presidential bid. And then which he did. And then people have died. More than 100 people were killed in 2020. So this time again, so no one can say that is his fourth presidential term it is based on some legal uh, justification. There is no legal justification for that. Not at all.
How do you assess the disqualification of opposition leaders like Bagbo himself, Thiam, and Soro? Was it a legal or strategic kind of thing that those leaders who have been around for a long time do to take out their opponents?
Based on the Ivorian law, for somebody to run for president, you have to have your name on the electoral list. So that's the first thing people need to understand. So when Babu was in prison in The Hague, he was tried and condemned in absentia, if I can use that expression. He was in The Hague and he was tried in Ivory Coast. And then when he was acquitted by the International Criminal Court, Ouattara's legal system thinks that Gbagbo should be convicted for what they called a economic holdup. In other words, when they were putting all the sanctions against Gbagbo in 2010, 2011, Gbagbo somehow nationalized the Ivorian branch of the West African countries bank. And by doing so, people thought that he did like a hold up. And then this is what they used to condemn him. So his name was removed from the electoral list and he cannot even run for president. This is what Ouattara did. In the case of Soro Guillaume, Soro was accused of attempting to do a coup d'etat against Ouattara. And then he fled, he's in exile. Same thing, the same methodology was applied to him. His name is not on the electoral list, and then he cannot run for president. Tidjane Thiam, for him, it is about his citizenship or his nationality. Okay, we grew up in Ivory Coast. We knew that Tidjane Thiam's father came from Senegal. That's why he's called Thiam. But we saw him in Ivory Coast as the grandson of the first president of Ivory Coast, Houphouët-Boigny. And then we knew that his mother was Ivorian. And according to the law in Ivory Coast, if you have one parent who is an Ivorian, then you are an Ivorian. So Tidjane Thiam, we grew up, I would say, together because we belong to the same generation, and we knew that he has always been Ivorian. But now what we heard is that when he went to Europe to work in those financial institutions, he took the citizenship of France. And then he had kept it for a very, very long time. And then when he was hoping to run for president, when he put his name on the electoral list, he had not renounced prior to that to his French citizenship.
So it was a technicality. They knocked him out on a technicality.
On a technicality.
Okay.
So this happened.
But to that point, remember, even when Alassane Ouattara was first running for president, those issues came up. How people are talking about his nationality. I remember back then you and I talking about this, saying that he was not an Ivorian. So this is like a cycle thing. So it looks like it works when it's a political expedient for the person in power to use that against the person they're running against.
Yeah, this what it is. So it is unbelievable, but the Ouattara that we knew had taken, because this is a historical fact, he had taken the citizenship of Burkina Faso, of Upper Volta, and then he came to the United States as a citizen of Upper Volta, and then later on he worked at the International Monetary Fund. Based on what I heard and what we saw, that he was still a citizen of Upper Volta. So, but later on, one thing that we need to know is that when he wanted to run for president, Bédier used that against him. And then somebody like me, I say, okay, even if he was recorded, he was known as a citizen of Upper Volta. Listen, Let's try and find like a political solution. That was my position. And then later on, Babo took his time to allow Alassane Ouattara to run for president, and then the rest is history.
Interesting. How about what does the low voter turnout in urban centers,
No, no, no.
especially like
Listen,
in
if I tell you that, if I tell you that I know, I will be lying. There is no way. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I wanted to know like what does this mean? Because obviously we are looking at something that a lot of people say is a selection, not an election. But in most cases, numbers matter. Ouattara's people showed up to vote. People who are in opposition did not show up to vote. So let's say the votes are counted. They have a couple days to count these votes, and Ouattara comes up on top because his people showed up to vote. What are these people going to do about it?
Who are going to do? Who are you talking about?
The concerned citizens, the opposition, and everybody else.
Yeah, it's a great question. Now for the turnout, this really, if I say that, I know I will be lying, because even in 2010, 2011, that was my point of contention when I was denouncing the elections. I remember telling you that I don't know who won the election. That I can never say Babo won the election 2010, 2011. But one thing I knew for sure, that the turnout that they announced when they proclaimed Ouattara the winner, that turnout could not be true because of some evidence that I had coming from the United Nations mission in Ivory Coast, which was supervising the election, right? So I saw it myself that after a meeting between an observer and then the head of the United Nations mission, both of them agreed that the turnout in the second round was low, or was low, that it could not match the turnout of the first round. The first round it was 83%. The second round they said it was 81%. I said no, but what the UN mission said that it could not go beyond 70%. It was around 60%. Back then already they fixed it, the turnout of the election. So that was my point of contention when I was debating. Now that Mr. Ouattara is controlling the electoral commission, and then the opposition is not represented in that electoral commission the way it should, and then they don't those who decide to run, who don't have some how can I say that, those who can represent them like in those voting places. So
You
definitely,
mean like agents are
yeah, agent,
representing?
they don't have enough,
Hmm.
because you need some thousands of people. They don't have that. Or even if you have some, you cannot claim to have them across the entire country. It's not possible. So Mr. Ouattara's people, they can say anything, they can write any turnout that they want. But we know that Babo is still popular, and we know that Tidentiam is popular, and we know that those two together basically will be at least 40% of the population, of the electoral population.
Since you are a history professor, let me bring in something into the context here. I remember Joseph Stalin back in the day, who came up with a phrase to say that it doesn't matter how many people show up to vote, but what matters is who counts and controls the voting process, right?
Yeah.
Um, right? You remember that. So, in the context of Ivory Coast, you alluded earlier to the body that is in charge of uh, arranging these elections, announcing the results, is handpicked by Ouattara. What expectations are there, since we know that this body really serves at uh, the interest of President Alassane Ouattara?
Yes, like I said, there's no. I know that there was a serious debate in Ivory Coast about whether or not people should go to the elections, the opposition, or they should boycott the election. That was the debate. And there are some who say, no, we're tired of boycotting the election. It never served, the purpose. It never served the interests of those who want to boycott. So let's go to the election anyway. Some other people say, you know what? So what is the point? You go there. First of all, the opposition was not prepared. I don't think that they have done like a recession drive. So well, let me give you an example. It looks like in 15 years, the population of Ivory Coast moved from 25 million to 32 million. So we know most of those people come from neighboring countries, and to whom they gave like Ivorian citizenship, and then they have inflated the electoral population in Ivory Coast, or even the population in the country. So so that's one element. But another element is that Mr. Ouattara himself said that he does not believe in what you guys call democracy. He said he does not believe in that. So he even said one day he wished he were a king. He said that himself. So we're not surprised. So it is because he has to respect the electoral process. That's why he's doing that. If not, he does not even care about people go, they vote or they don't vote. It does not. It does not need that. Remember, so when there was an electoral dispute in 2010 or 2011, what did he do? It resorted to violence.
Mm. Mm.
So
So
now,
can we see?
there's a question that you asked about the opposition. So I don't know what they're going to do, to be honest with you, because they don't have a clear strategy. They don't. I don't see them uh, trying to reinvent the struggle. So I don't know what they're going to do. So we will see. Because guess what? The country is supposed to organize the legislative elections in December. You boycott, the presidential election. What do you do? Are you going to try and have some lawmakers with the same electoral commission, and they have not changed like the reality on the ground? So power is not on the side. So listen, I don't know what they're going to do.
To your point, when you have talked to people on the ground, some of your friends who talk about this issue regularly or on a daily basis, when we look at what has been happening in West Africa, you've had coups in the neighboring countries, where you have had, change of government by people trying to, uh, basically, these leaders who have opposed to democracy are being taken out by some young people that we've seen, and these young people seem to be doing very well. Now, in the case of Ivory Coast, can a process that has barred all the major political opposition figures from participating in this election be considered a democratic process?
Like I missed your question. Can you say that again?
So, okay, can this process that Ivory Coast just underwent, the election, campaigning, elections, people voted yesterday, but the majority of the people were bad, like the politicians that you talked about were bad from really participating in this process. So, could this be considered as a democratic process? Help me understand that.
No, no, no. Of course, you yourself. You have your the answer of your own questions or to your own question. Of course, like I just said, Mr. Ouattara said that he does not believe in the democratic process. He does not believe in democracy. He wish he were a king. This is what he said. So of course, because we're not in a context of democracy. How somebody who use violence to come to power is going to abide by democratic rules? No. So he seemed to tolerate the opposition parties. He seemed to tolerate some level of free expression. But when he has a feeling that the free expression and the people are taking some liberty, that it may endanger his presidency, automatically different groups of people who have the power to coerce, who have the power to oppress, who have the power to repress, who have the power to put in jail, who have the power to kill, they are automatically activated. And this is what they did. Like I said, yesterday, people were killed. After yesterday or this morning, people were killed. And then there was a time people were protesting, people were killed. And then he bans some rallies that the opposition wanted to organize, but at the same time, his people have the right to be in the streets. So there is no people. Like I said, though, that was the point. That's why you guys saw me talking about the Ivorian political situation, is because you guys did not know the guy. I have the privilege to have studied the guy. I studied, I observed. It's not just because I'm an Ivorian, but I have studied Ivorian politics, and then one way to know one to do some I won't say good analysis, to do some relevant analysis, you have to know the players. So I know the players, and then so that's why what you see today, we knew anyone could forecast that if you know how the guy functions, how the guy operates. And then one of the things that you guys maybe are not aware of is that we call that in French rattrapage ethnique. It's like ethnic catching up. The expression was coined by Mr. Ouattara himself, saying that the Northerners were excluded. This is what he said. They represent 40% of the population, according to his arithmetic, and then they were excluded from the administration while they were in the rebellion. And then because of that, when he came to power, he has appointed, my brother, you will not believe it, major senior position in the country, like 90% of them are held by people from the northern part of the country. In a country like Ivory Coast, which is a multi-ethnic nation, this is what he did.
Uh,
And this
we
and,
are
and this and this, and this is what he believed in. And
right.
because when you guys were talking about Ivarite, the people around him, they were thinking about the Charter of the Northerners. And I've spoken about that in my book, the Charter of the Northerners. So in 1990, there were two conflicting ideologies, ethnocentric ideologies, Ivarite on one side, and then the Charter of the Northerners on the other side. So now he's in power and he's been implementing both of them. Can you imagine? He's implementing the Charter of the Northerners in order to consolidate the power of the Northerners, and at the same time is using Ivarite in order to eliminate Tidjantiam.
Wow, interesting stuff. Uh, we are live, and in case you are just joining us, I'm joined by a returning guest and friend of this program, Dr. Nyaka Lagoke, an associate professor of history, philosophy, and religion at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, and a respected voice on the Ivorian and African politics. Dr. Lagoke has been sounding the alarm for many years about what he calls constitutional coups and the erosion of democratic norms in West Africa. Back to you, Nyaka. How would you respond to Ouattara's supporters who argue or credit him with a strong economic growth and stability? That Ivory Coast has been stable. For example, like there was a time when like the African Development Bank had even left, gone to North Africa. Now they are back. Everything seems to be working. How do you respond to those guys?
Yeah, one thing, I'm going to seize the opportunity of the question that you asked, to talk about one thing. So we don't. Maybe one day when we talk about Pan Africanism, we can talk more about that. It is what I call the wheel of imperialism. Now, this is what they do. When they want to go after you, they use the different elements of the wheel of imperialism: the financial institutions, the military bases, the press, the so-called democratic institutions or the civil society. I was in Pittsburgh. I learned an expression yesterday, and I want to use that. And I'm quoting them because I like it. Usually we talk about the military-industrial complex. This is what we say. But over there, I heard about the social industrial complex, how the NGOs are used by the powers in order to try and advance a so-called humanitarian agenda, but to advance the imperial agenda. So it was in that context that they needed to break Gbagbo. And then under the leadership of France, that does not want to see a nationalist leaders leading those francophone countries. Gbagbo Laurent, uh, beyond his missteps and beyond the mistakes he made, and several of them, and I've spoken about that in many instances, he meant to free Ivory Coast, unlike Alassane Ouattara. So that's why they raised up the rebellion, and then they took advantage of the issue of Alassane Ouattara's nationality. Like I said, Yes, Mr. Ouattara was known as a citizen of Upper Volta, but there was a time people like me, and this was going to be the reason why I have some strained relationship with Babu and his people. One of the reasons is that you guys could not defeat the guy in the name of, for the sake of peace. Think about how to give the possibility of the guy to be in the political arena. And then then they decided to break him using the World Bank. Okay, the African Development Bank left Ivory Coast. So everything that is connected to the international community or to that will of imperialism was activated in order to break Bagbolora. Now they did a rebellion. Some Ivorians said, "Oh, people said that we are in peace." Okay, if the people were the one who causing violence, now they're in power. Why are we not going to be in peace? This is what people are saying. But we give him the credit for that. He built some infrastructures, and I appreciate that. People are the news I'm hearing, and then even though it is something that can be seen as a tribalistic thing, in the north there is a city in Ivory Coast called Korogo. I heard that they did some good work there. This is where the Prime Minister Gon Coulibaly was coming from. So I heard that he built some nice roads here and there. So we can give the credit to Mr. Ouattara for that. But for people like me, this is not development. And when 80% of your economy is in the hands of foreigners, when I talk about foreigners, I'm not talking about Mali, and I'm not talking about Burkina Faso. I'm talking about those multinationals, which most of the time serve the interests of the imperial order. When you cannot even have factories controlled by Ivorians, when you don't have what we call in French champion local de l'économie, when you don't have the local champions of the Ivorian economy, when it is in the hands of the French, of the multinationals, or when things are in the hands of some Lebanese, even though they contribute, to the economic life of the country. So in Ivory Coast, like in Senegal, in Togo, we export. I'm sorry. We import. I'm sorry. We import rice that we eat. This, can you imagine? If after 15 years we are still fed by the exterior market, but my friend, this is not development. So that's why when people talk about that, and then if you can talk to Ivorian, you will see there is a few who have almost everything, and the majority of Ivorians they're jobless in that country of Ivory Coast. So this is not development, but people can use that to justify what they did to Ivory Coast, thinking that they brought development. There is no development in Ivory Coast, and then that kind of peace, even the peace that we have, it is not like a strong peace, because if Ouattara is not in power, his people are going to come and do the same thing. If there is no real resistance against the way they see the world.
You brought up a very interesting point. I wanted to go back to that. I remember when I was a young kid studying history. The one thing that I remember that kind of ignited my interest in African politics was when they were talking about colonization and assimilation. For example, I grew up in Uganda, which was a British colony. You grew up in Ivory Coast, which was quote unquote, uh, you guys had a different form of colonialism, but instead of colonialism, it was more like assimilation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, fast forward, the people in the Anglophones who fought hard to get rid of the colonizers, uh, to this day, I could say they're proud to be in control of some of their things, some of the economies, the industries, most of the things are manufactured in those countries. I've been to a lot of West African countries, Anglophonies, right? And I cannot believe that to this day, for example, your currencies are still pegged to your former colonizer, France. Most even paying water bills, like in Ivory Coast where you are, electric bills people pay in France. How is that? How come all these years, almost 60 something years later after independence, nobody has been able to stop that?
Now, this is what I want to explain. One of the things people, and I agree for I'm going to talk, it's a very important question. One thing that people need to know is that uh, even people like me, or people who care about Africa, like you, many people talk about Africa. My friends, we don't know neocolonialism. We think we know, we don't. We are not doomed in Africa. We are not stupid. Babo is not stupid. Ouattara is not stupid. But the system put into place by the Europeans, it is so strong, so vicious, my brother, that if you go there, you rise to power, and then if you have not taken your time to put together like a real strategy, you are likely to be defeated and destroyed by that system. Why I'm saying that? When Ghana became independent, March 6, 1957, the Europeans were already having some discussions to put into place the European Economic Community. You understand? And then when they were putting the European Economic Community, which today we call the European Union, France again, was trying to have some negotiation with the members of that community in order for them to accept that in one of the clauses that European community be linked through some economic ties with the colonies, which were about to become independent. So Ivory Coast and many Francophone countries became independent in 1960, but they were already bound to the European community before they became independent. The next step that the French did is that France signed some agreement with each of those countries, and then France was supposed to have a preferential treatment. In other words, if you want to sell your resources, you have to think about France first. If it is when we don't want, we can tell you who is going to go, whom you will sell, your things to. They did that with Ivory Coast, with different countries. And then as they did that, the third step was going to be bringing all those countries together. And this is how they started talking about the Yaoundé 1, Yaoundé 2, Yaoundé 3. And later on it became Lomé 1, Lomé 2, Lomé 3. And this is why they used to be called the Cotonou Agreement. I don't know if you heard about it, or the Samoa Agreement today. With that, again, those African countries and even the countries in the Pacific, they're in that organization controlled by France and some European countries, but France took the lead to do that. The regional economic integration that we talk about in Africa, when the African countries meet there is another reality, another understanding of the economic integration, which was going to divide further African countries, which was going to break the process of African economic integration on the continent. I just give you those three elements, my friend, and I can give you many other schemes that the Europeans put into place. And then in the case of France, the CFA franc that they put together since 1945. When you want to come and talk about it, what happened to you? I'm going to give you an example. The first president of Togo, Sylvanus Olympio, he wanted to create his own currency. In the meantime, when Sékou Touré said no to the French, Sékou Touré, he had the opportunity to create his own currency. What did they do, the French? They decided to put some counterfeit bills there in order to destroy the currency of Guinea. And in the meantime, they orchestrated a coup d'etat against Sylvanus Olympio. On the eve of a trip he was supposed to take to go to France, in order to sign the agreement with France, he was overthrown and he was killed. The people who replaced him, they said that they were not going to leave the CFA franc anymore. In the case of Mali, when Modibo Keïta became independent and he created his own currency, he was going to be overthrown in 1968. As people came after him, they decided to go back to the CFA franc. The multinationals, In the case of Ivory Coast and many other Francophone countries, the water sector, the electricity sector, the banking sector, even the bridges that are being built, many other elements have
The
to be controlled.
minerals,
The what?
the minerals that
The
they
mineral,
get.
it has to be controlled. They are controlled by friends. I remember when I was young, and then Ufotboyi, the first president, the people ask him, "Oh yeah, you know, Ivory Coast is the cocoa producer #1, but why you don't have a chocolate factory?" And the guy expressed there was a kind of confession that I read when I was young. He said that if I wanted to build a chocolate factory, the Europeans were not going to allow me to do that. And then I'm going to quote Obasanjo, president of Nigeria, and he said one day, when the World Bank comes to you with a development plan, even if you don't want, you cannot say no. So this is the context in which those African leaders are trying to survive, try to preserve the peace of the security of the countries, and at the same time try to do the right thing. So Gbagbo, recently, when he was one of the reasons why they decided to bomb him, it is when he was thinking about creating like a Nigerian currency too. It is part of the conversation. But one of the weaknesses of those African leaders, they don't know how to strategize. They don't know how to come together. And that is the problem that we have. Even because when they are there, instead of rallying people who can think, who can support them, they don't do that. Because they have power, they think that they have arrived. So these are all those elements that the Europeans are using in order to weaken us. So that's something that we need to know. So in my book that I wrote about the International Criminal Court, yes, I spoke about that wheel of imperialism that they've been using to bring Nkrumah, Lumumba, Modibo Keita, Nelson Mandela, Gbagbo Laurent, and this is what they're using today against Ibrahim Traoré from Burkina Faso, or against Assimi Goïta from Mali, or in Niger, with Tchani. So this is what I wanted to say about your question.
Yeah, very insightful. I like that answer. Okay, let's go back to what we're talking about. You talked about these multinationals, but let's focus a little bit on France. What's France's role in this election or in legitimizing what a lot of people say is a constitutional coup in Ivory Coast, allowing President Alassane Ouattara to run for the fourth time?
But as you know me a little bit, you know, when I talk about things, I like to be honest. So I know that the French did not want Mr. Ouattara to run for the third term. This I knew. And I don't think that they were going to be vocal and support him for the fourth term. Macron himself, he has his own issues in France. But the news that we heard is that Ufo-Boigny grandson, Tidjane Thiam, seemed to have like some good connection with Macron. And then we were hearing that they were supporting him to come and run for president in Ivory Coast. So there was a time it looks like it was the preferred choice over Mr. Ouattara. But what the mistake that the French made, and even to then what Tidjane Thiam himself, is that Mr. Ouattara, he has his own game and he has his own rules, which are different from the rules that many people believe in.
Right.
So he's there. I'm not moving. He's not moving. And then, so what can France do? But they're not going to go and bomb him. They did not want to bomb. There are some people they cannot bomb. But Mr. Ouattara is serving the interest. They have to make a choice between somebody who is already there and who is serving their interest, and somebody who is going to come who may serve them, but not as much as the one who is there. So the choice was not too difficult. So that's why Tidjane Thiam has been so upset. He has the feeling that he's been betrayed by the people who were pushing him to come and run for president. But the game in Ivory Coast is vicious. People die. People are being poisoned. So it's not a game that Tidjane Thiam can play. So that's why it was easily defeated by Mr. Ouattara. So now, but when when Macron, for instance, was mobilizing the troops to go against Niger for a war, he was doing that because over there people mean to free the country. So let's say if tomorrow there is a coup d'etat in Ivory Coast, because there are many people who are thinking that even though Mr. Ouattara seems to control everything, but the only way people think that it is a possibility. I don't know. I'm just observing. But if there is a coup in Ivory Coast, you're going to see France now trying to mobilize the international community to go and then dislodge those who are going to take power in Ivory Coast. But in the meantime, Mr. Ouattara has done already some military, civilian coup d'etat already, and then hundreds of people have been killed since he came to power. So, and then that equation, France could not resolve it by attacking leaders, but military officers in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and by the same time, France is not is like I would say silent, is not using the same energy in order to put pressure on those who are doing the civilian coup d'etat. Then, of course, that's why many people in Africa do not believe in the democratic system anymore, and many in Africa think that France is like the biggest problem of Africa, of Francophone Africa.
I wanted to ask you something along those lines. Now that I brought it up, maybe let me go back to it. Uh, Ivory Coast is surrounded by countries that have had their fair share of quote unquote democracy and then coups. You talked about Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, Gabon. Let's not forget Gabon. Gabon had a military coup there, even though the guy was able to pull it off, called an election and pulled it off, but it was a military coup, whichever way you want to describe it. And we also have the Gen Zs. We've seen the Gen Zs rise up and challenge these establishments. For example, most recently, about 2 weeks ago in Madagascar, in Morocco right now, there is the Gen Z are on the streets. They might take down the kingdom. We saw in Nepal, young people taking the streets. What's wrong with the young people in Ivory
Coast? Okay, so I will say, what's wrong with what is wrong with the young people in Rwanda? What is wrong with the young people in Uganda?
Good point.
So the level of violence in Ivory Coast, it is different, my friend. Because it's not like I'm excusing my fellow citizens. It's not that. I can be here in the United States and talk, those people are weak, they should take to the street. No, I cannot even think like that. Because I know the level of violence that they use to come to power. We never did that in Ivory Coast. When Gbagbo was fighting against Ufo-Boigny, he was talking about the peaceful transition to democracy. Gbagbo did not want to take like a raise an army. Couldn't even think about that. They couldn't even think like that. So there was a coup d'etat in 1999. But the level of violence that we saw with Mr. Ouattara, they did a civil war. You know what is the meaning of a civil war? A civil war is a war that can happen in a country when factions fight. The people who die the most are the civilians. They kill the civilians just because those people belong to the Gbagbo constituencies. When they say that there was an when they say that there was a electoral stalemate, Mr. Ouattara resorted, to his armed groups, and then they mobilized the international community with the UN and France. They bombed the presidential palace. They bombed the universities and hospitals. This can cause a trauma in the population, right? This is what I've read that they have endured. Despite that, we saw them in the streets. But it's because they have not reached a level of organization that can be effective. But it can happen. But I want people to understand that. Because one of the problems that I have with Gbagbo's administration is that everything that you see today in Mali, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, even the Gen Z that you talk about, what do you think, according to you, what are the historical factors that led to the awakening of the masses in Africa? Yes, the killing of Gaddafi, but surely the bombing of Gbagbo's presidential palace. I have seen many people who have revolted to see the French bombing the presidential palace of an African leader. They took him to The Hague. The same way they deported Béhanzin, they deported Samuel Touré, the same way they deported Toussaint Louverture in Haiti, the same way. People saw that. And that's why, because of the knowledge that we have about Pan-Africanism, that's why we knew that that was the sense of history. So Gbagbo's fate contributed, to awaken the masses. And then with the Ouattara's governance, we see that the French were not there in the name of democracy. They were there to advance the neo-colonial agenda. So to end on this issue, I have faith. I have faith in the destiny of my nation. Everything that you see me doing, it is because I believe that Ivory Coast has a duty, historical duty. And then we don't know how. Listen, in Tunisia, when Ben Ali was overthrown, how did it happen? Somebody set himself on fire.
Right.
And that was it. That fire was the spark, and it was the spark of some awakening. It was a spark that took the president out of power. Sometimes we don't need to have like a great movement organized the way it happened in Nepal, but for Ivory Coast to return to a multi-party system, we took to the street, my generation, and many people did that. When General Gay wanted to retain power, when he was defeated by Gbagbo asked people to take to the streets, and then they stopped what Gbagbo called the imposture of the general. So we have our share of contribution in the process of the African Revolution, but we don't know what will happen. But let's see. The situation is still explosive, and Ouattara's regime is not so sure, even though they have those thousands of soldiers and they have groups of people who can go and hurt and beat and kill. They are not sure. No one knows the future. That's why people should not be arrogant. Who could believe that the president of Madagascar could leave power? Who could even think about that?
Putting on your Pan-Africanist hat, you've always argued that when it comes to these leaders who circumvent their constitutions or the laws of the land to change the rules that favor them, and in some cases come up with a third, fourth term, they should be held to the same account as those leaders who overthrow, using military means, overthrow the government, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've always made that assertion. Now, given the fact that you have a leader like Alassane Ouattara, yes, legally the process was legal, blah, 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 but he took advantage of a weakened system already, and he was able to pull that off. Why can the same argument be made for the African Union, or the ECOWAS and other institutions to ban these kinds of leaders from holding office, or they suspend those countries from being part of those organizations once they do that?
I think that it's a blessing in disguise. Because what they're doing, they're expressing bad faith. Oh yes, they will need to go against Mali. This was Ouattara was the one. Ouattara, Macky Sall, and then they brought Tinubu in the process, and Patrice Talon from Benin. Oh yes, we are against the military coup. First of all, what happened in Mali, what happened in Burkina Faso, and what happened in Niger were not mere military coup d'etat. People need to know that. They were not mere coup d'etat. People took to the streets. Mm-hmm. People were organizing. People were protesting. And then eventually, the military had to step in order to take the demands of the people in the street to another level. This happened in Mali, in Niger, in Burkina Faso. I'm not saying that those leaders are doing exactly what the people wanted, but I'm just saying that that is the process. It's the same way of thinking about Rawlings rising to power as a military coup, or Thomas Sankara rising to power as just a military coup is not true, because when you look at the context, there were people protesting, organizing, and then the military took over. So they don't want. They can talk about the military the way they do, because they are afraid that what the military did may give some ideas to people in Ivory Coast, in some other parts like in Benin and some other parts of Africa. That's why they are so against those military takeover. But and then uh, those who are members of ECOWAS, of the African Union, they are friends. They belong to the same club of leaders. There is no way they're going to hurt themselves, so they cannot say anything. They do everything they can in order to prevent military takeover, and then to justify what they're doing for instance, a greater purpose. Ouattara thinks that he has to be there to bring for stability. In other words, only him can bring stability to Ivory Coast. So if he's not there, there is not going to be stability. Maybe it is true because these people will be again in the bush. They're going to try and do another civil war, maybe, but it is unfair. So that is the reality, also part of the tragedy of Africa.
So we are almost running out of time. What happens next? Could we see maybe protests, people who are dissatisfied with this electoral process take to the streets? What should people expect? People who are watching from afar, like us, what should we expect after the results are announced?
I will be a little bit surprised if people do the protest now. I will be surprised. It can happen because there are some people who are still planning to do that, but I will be surprised. I think that maybe down the line, people may regroup, reorganize, and then to like try to do like a better street protest. But now, what will be the justification? Now, if we say yes, we are against the third term, okay, because of that, we don't want to recognize him as the president. So then it's going to become a weak argument. But they have to try and see, okay, you know what, the guy does not deserve to be in power for the third term, for the fourth term. Number two, we are not eating. Number three, we are hungry. Number four, there is injustice. So when you do all the things together, then you can have like the right narrative, for you to organize the struggle. So let's wait and see.
Well, Dr. Nyakalagoke, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for the wonderful work that you're doing.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We want to know what you think about the elections in the Ivory Coast, where President Alassane Ouattara, now 83 years old, is seeking a controversial fourth term in office. Key opposition leaders were banned from the race, protesters were crushed, and many voters stayed at home in protest. Share your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. And of course, don't forget to like and follow and subscribe to Paul Ndiho on Substack, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Spotify. Stay tuned for the continuing coverage on this platform as we bring you the official results from the election. Good night for now. Thank you so much.